Okay, we left off last time talking about cyclical unemployment, as in the business cycle, the boom-bust business cycle. And we said from a Keynesian perspective, if we can eliminate the pain of unemployment by stimulating demand when the economy is going south, not only can the government do that, but the government should. There's a moral imperative that the government fix these inherent problems with the free market. When we were talking earlier about demand side and supply side economics, part of the demand side economics is that the free market creates booms and busts. And it is just an unavoidable, regrettable outcome that the free market is unstable and creates booms and busts. And because it's unstable, it's the government's duty and responsibility to get the economy back on track so that we're on full employment. Where the supply side, people are saying, no, you don't understand. It was the government's intervention in the first place that created the wild swings in the marketplace, and that's why we got to get the government out of it so that the invisible hand of Adam Smith can bring this boat back into some sort of stable condition here. And the supply side, we need to let the free market work. So one side says, the demand side says, the Keynesian side said, there is this inherent instability and problem. The free market's normally great, and when it's great, it's really, really good. It's just like little girls. When they're great, they're really, really good, but when they're bad, they're horrid. Oh, the same thing with the free market. When it's good, it's really, really good, but when it's bad, you got to do something about it. And the government's supposed to do something about it, and that's help the demand side. So we're on the third of the three kinds of unemployment, and the last kind is called structural. Structural unemployment. I remember in high school that there were some of my classmates took courses in mechanical drawing, and they would go into the room and they'd have a big flat surface like this, and they'd sit on a little round stool and they would tilt it up like that and had a T-square, and they would move it around and they would make front views and top views and bottom views and side views of different objects that were intended to be manufactured. And because there were jobs for people who could do that very well and could get that technique down and make engineering drawings, what we still call blueprints because they were blue at that point in time. But times changed, and we have a thing called computer-aided design, computer-aided drafting, so that we no longer have people sitting at these drawing boards. We have people in front of a big computer monitor, and they're moving lines around, and we're building it inside a piece of computer software. Now, my point here is that there used to be people who had a job doing mechanical drawing, and now we don't need anybody to do mechanical drawing, and so we lay them off. We either lay them off or we retrain them into a new occupation that has replaced the old occupation. Now, that's called structural unemployment, when we lay off people because we don't need them to do that anymore. It's called structural unemployment. In my experience in industry, I would have all these deviant parts and problems and had to write engineering reports, and so I would write these reports and I would write them by hand, and I would take them over and I would give them to my secretary, and she would, on her typewriter, would type them all up, and then she would put it back in my in basket, and I'd read it and proofread it, and if I agreed, yeah, that's right, I would sign it and I'd hand it out to her and she'd take care of all that sort of stuff. That was then. This is now, and last time I noticed there are no people out there who get paid to type the handwritten memos of engineers or executives or managers. Today, you're expected to know that keyboard and talk through that keyboard, and if you can't talk with your fingers through that keyboard, I'm sorry, we just don't have a place for you in this organization. I mean, it's just kind of like one of the fundamental skills you have to have. When I went to high school way back when, I took typing as a course. I don't know if they still teach typing or anything like that, but most kids who are 10, 12, whatever, they're going crazy on that thing. Even if it's hunt and peck, they can use a QWERTY keyboard. So now, just like you're supposed to know how to spell and how to do math and all those sorts of things, that's a basic prerequisite to getting hired. Now, basic keyboarding skills is a prerequisite, where before, people would get hired to do that. Let me give you a historical example of structural unemployment. Once upon a time, if you wanted to read a book late at night, you would have to light a lantern. My mom told me that she remembered one of her household chores was to trim the wicks of the lamps, the oil lamps, so they would burn evenly all the way around, so this side wouldn't be really hot and high flame, and this would be low. You got to clip it, and then when you turn it up, it gets brighter, and you turn it down, and you set it there, and you can read your book because you have a nice, steady glow. Have any of you ever tried to read a book by the light of a fireplace? Can you imagine what that was like? Flicker, 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 flicker. It's almost as bad. We have flat screen monitors. Any of you remember the CRT, cathode ray tube monitors, that look at the old movies, and when they're typing on a computer or something like that, or a television, the television's like this thick? You guys don't remember televisions this thick, or some of you do. See, they used to be this thick, right? Because there's a big old monitor there, and it was shooting an electron beam to hit the screen, and things would light up and do all that sorts of stuff. Now we have these flat screen things there. Now, for some of us who know what a CRT monitor is and a refresh rate and all that sort of stuff, if the refresh rate wasn't exactly right, or if it just happened to hit the resonance of 60 cycles or something, it would start blinking at you. And it would, give you a headache trying to read that thing when it's blinking at you. It was terrible. Life used to be really rough. Blinking at you. Well, it's the same thing with the firelight. It kind of flickers at you, and it kind of gives you a headache. And so they would, to read at night, to have a glow, they would just have these oil lamps. Well, what kind of oil? Well, it was whale oil. They would get whale oil. On Moby Dick, they'd get Moby Dick and get him and flay him and get the fat and all that stuff, and they would sell the oil, render the oil. And they had that kind of oil because you could burn in your house, and it didn't give off a lot of black soot and turn everything black and gooey in your house. I'm going someplace with this story about structural unemployment. Believe me or not, I really am. And all of a sudden, sometime in that history, a guy from Cleveland, Ohio, which I mentioned before, named John D. Rockefeller, who had a fruit stand, was told to go to Pennsylvania and look into this thing of this black goo coming out of the ground and give him a business report on it, see if there's any business prospect of getting that stuff. Anybody know what he told them? Should I go out there and punch holes in the ground to get oil out? And he said, no. It's kind of a bad idea. It's too risky. You don't know if you're going to get anything out. Let somebody else go punch the holes in the ground, and then you get in the business of refining that stuff and making some good stuff out of it. They go, oh, that's pretty creative. Well, since you got the idea and you figured that out, would you mind being head of the company that does all that stuff? So he went from being a fruit vendor, pushing a fruit thingy up and down the streets of Cleveland, Ohio, to the Standard Oil Company. That's a long story short, but he hired some engineers from Germany, and they came to this distillation process, and they could break down this oil into this, into this, into this, into these. Everything we've got now is made out of, not everything, lots and lots of things we got made out of oil. And one of the things that they made out of oil was that they could replace the whale oil with what they called paraffin at the time. What we don't call it paraffin, but the first tractors ran on paraffin. Was really refined petroleum, and they refined it so it didn't give off this black soot, and now you could buy that John D. Rockefeller refined oil product instead of killing Moby Dick and getting all the whale oil. And the prices came down, and so people quit buying the whale oil because they could get something that did close to the same thing from the oil industry. Now we're getting into structural unemployment. For generation after generation after generation, the entire northern seaboard of the United States was involved in whaling because it was a big industry. Everybody needed whale oil. And when Johnny Rockefeller came out with this new product called paraffin, which is the same thing, it was a whole lot cheaper, then all of a sudden nobody really wanted to buy the expensive whale oil when they could get the inexpensive stuff made out of this coal tar, oil, petroleum stuff. And so the demand for that went down, and all of a sudden people were still allowed to go out there. But the price, nobody was going to pay that high price, but now they had competition. Now, in your mind's eye, think of someone who's maybe just a young guy who just got married, just starting a family, borrowed to have a house, and he grew up in the fishing business or the whaling business, and his daddy was in the whaling business, his grandpa was in the whaling business, they've always been in the whaling business. The whole town lives off of the whaling business, and all of a sudden the whole whaling business all up and down the seacoast just kind of goes away. Nobody wants to buy the stuff anymore. Well, what do? I mean, you got a mortgage and everybody else is leaving and they sell their house. When they sell their house, guess what happens to the value of your house? It goes down. Now all of a sudden the mortgage is bigger than what the value of the house is, and nobody's going to pay him to go whaling anymore, and all the jobs seem to be leaving and going to the manufacturing. They're going over to Cleveland, Ohio or Pennsylvania, something like that. Could you put yourself, could you empathize with somebody who thought they had a good solid job that's been in the family for generations, and all of a sudden the structure of the economy changed and we don't need people to go whaling anymore? Would that create a hardship, or did that create a hardship for very many people? Oh, terrible hardship. No bones of terrible hardship. Now let's back up a second from a macroeconomic view. And you got to stand back for this one. Was it a good thing that all those people don't have jobs in whaling anymore? Stand back. Is that? I know it's not a good thing for the individual. You can see them by the hundreds or thousands. It's not a good thing. It's disrupting whole communities. Land values are going down. It's terrible. At a personal level, it's terrible. But you back up a second and say, is it a good thing? Well, let's look at this. Mrs. McGillicuddy with her 10 kids, she raises by herself. All of a sudden, because the heating or the lighting oil went down, she's now able to afford shoes for 3 more kids that she couldn't afford before because the cost of lighting the house went down. Is her life better off? Is some of her kids' life better off? And all of a sudden we lost all those jobs over there in whaling, but when she wants to buy more shoes, all of a sudden we need more people to go in the shoe factory because now people have the ability and desire to buy more shoes than they did before because their standard of living was increased because they don't have to pay all that high price for the whale oil anymore. Let me just say it this way. The free market was giving a message to the people in the whaling business. Don't do that anymore. Will you stop doing that? And the way they get that message is they're going to go broke and they're going to starve to death if they don't get that message. And they're thinking, this isn't going to work. Is there anybody else who wants to hire me? And the people in Pennsylvania say, yeah, I got a shoe factory. I need lots of people. I don't have enough people. Will people come over here? So what's lost in one area is gained in the other area. And as a whole, is the economy better off with lower priced lighting oil and more shoes for everybody? Yeah, I guess so. But was it a hardship for those people over there? Absolutely. absolutely a hardship for those people over there. Now, when we're looking at this from a Keynesian perspective, and I'm giving you almost a quote from the text, Keynesians believe that society owes people jobs commensurate with their training and their experience. Society owes people jobs commensurate with their training and their experience. Therefore, it's the government's job, one way of doing it, would subsidize the whaling industry so that the economy, at least in that area, doesn't go down. But what does that do to the economy as a whole? Well, we're helping those people at the expense of higher taxes, so now Mrs. McGillicuddy doesn't have the money to buy shoes for 3 more of her kids because her tax money is going to subsidize a market activity that it's outdated, that really nobody really wants anymore at the market price level. Now, that's my historical illustration of structural unemployment. But from a Keynesian point of view, any pain and suffering in the economy is bad pain and suffering, and there is no good redeeming influence with it at all. However, from the classical, old classical or new neoclassical Austrian view, they're saying, well, wait a minute. This structural downturn of this whaling industry, or whatever industry it is, that's the free market's way of getting people out of an industry that people really don't want anymore and forcing them, it's not pleasant, it's not fun, nobody wants to go through it, but forcing them to relocate into an industry that society does want them and need them. They don't need them over here, need them over here. So how do you get them over there? The price mechanism. They're going to lose money and go broke and starve to death over there. They got to, as hard as it is, pick up roots, go someplace else, and start life someplace else in an industry that the economy wants. So the free market is giving a message to some people to do more of what you're doing, and giving another message to other people, do less of what you're doing. And if people are not doing something that people want, but not doing it very efficiently, then the free market is going to force that company out of business, and the people who are doing it efficiently will get more business. So it's forcing a layoff in company A, and those companies will go over and start working for company B, who's doing it more efficiently. And this process goes on continuously. One last illustration with this. Colds and flu season are not fun. It's not fun at all. But I think I gave this illustration before. If we lay down and if we rest and if we drink fluids and we let our body get rid of all the toxins, we're better off for it. We're better off for it. However, if we take a lot of pain pills and we drug ourselves and just keep on going, even though there's problems with everything and we can't detox, well, then the eventual problem is worse than the discomfort, the minor discomfort of a relatively minor sort of disease like colds and flus and things like that. So the free market is not all fun and games. The free market is harsh, but the free market always moves toward a higher standard of living for everybody at the expense of the inefficient or those markets which are not producing what the people as a whole need at that point in time.